of recording.
Tricked ya. Welcome to the show, everyone. We are really, really excited to be back here. I've taken about a month hiatus from the show, from recording with anybody, really. And there's a reason for that, but I can't share it yet. So stay tuned for that. In any regard, welcome back to the show. It is a pleasure to be here with you. And I'm here today with my friend and maybe, we'll see how it goes, co-host James.
What's going on, y'all?
If you are new to the show, welcome to the show. Thank you so much for tuning in. And if you are a longtime listener, again, I thank you so much for your support, love, and feedback. I ask you, if this show or this specific episode brings you value, to please share this episode with as many people as you can. Subscribe so you're notified when new episodes drop. And of course, like it. And if you tag us and if you post anything on social media, tag me or tag James. I want to talk about a couple of things before we dive into the show today, because we have a juicy one for you. Today, we're talking about harmonizing the masculine and feminine within us, particularly and specifically as this relates to spiritual consciousness and peace and union, a divine union. What does this all mean? But before I do, I just want to make a couple of announcements. As you know, my new book is out. It is Affirmations for a Peaceful Life. You can find it on Amazon. James has a copy. Amazon, Barnes and Noble, Kindle. Basically, anywhere you can buy books online, you can find my book. I'm really, really pleased with your guys' feedback so far. So if you do have the book and you've been reading it and you're listening to this, thank you so much for your feedback and your reviews. I really, really honor you. That was a long 3-year labor of love. So I'm happy to have it out there. And the last thing I would like to mention before we dive in here is my next retreat in March in Costa Rica. This is a way different one than I've ever done before. My healing program is going to be the same. However, this is going to be my only retreat for the year of 2025.
Why is that, Sarah?
I know, I'm so sad. But the same reason why I took the hiatus, James. So there's some news about that I will share at a later date, but this will be my one and only retreat for 2025. It's very bittersweet for me because, you know, I just love these retreats so much. So I have about 5 spots left for this retreat. If you have ever been interested in one of my healing retreats, now is the time to jump in. It's March 6th through 12th in Costa Rica. I'm just going to be very transparent. It's $2,500 all inclusive, you guys. You only need $500 is required to hold your spot, and the rest is not due until about a week before the retreat, unless there's payment plans available as well. So there are really no excuses. This is a very affordable retreat in regards to a week-long retreat, especially when you're doing this type of healing work. James actually just came from my last retreat.
I did. It was phenomenal. It was life-changing.
And now he's here.
So yes, this is my official guarantee. Go to it. It will be phenomenal for you.
Yes, he's opting in. So that's all I have for you. With that being said, I would love to open up a conversation here with James. James and I really clicked at the retreat. Actually, our story goes a little bit like this. I host free workshops. If you've been to one, you know what those are about. James came to one of them and we kind of connected right away after that workshop. From there, I said, James, you should come to this retreat. He said, I'm there. That's how easy it was.
It was a hard sell, let me tell you.
He's like, yes, sign me up. So he comes to the retreat. Again, we clicked at the retreat. A lot of transformation, a lot of growth. And we've just been really tight ever since. Really, we have a very similar mindset in the mental health field. Our way of thinking is very similar. And we got on this topic of masculine, feminine, and mentioning that this is actually a very spiritual process and part of, quote unquote, raising our consciousness. And so we wanted to open up a conversation. So first of all, James, welcome to my show.
Thank you. It's great being here.
Yeah.
Thank you
good to be, you know, we talk for hours like this anyway, so why not record it?
Should I introduce myself before we dive in, or?
Please do. Please do.
Cool. What's going on, y'all? My name is James Meredith. I'm a relationship coach. I run a little company called Mastering Relationships. And I do a lot of work with people who are struggling to overcome codependency and generally people pleasing, finally get the love and relationships they deserve. It's a topic that's near and dear to my heart as a recovered codependent myself. So super excited to be here.
You know what they say, James? Your pain turns into your purpose.
Yeah, it was about your wounds, your work is what I've heard. Yep.
Yeah, that's another good one. So, of course, when we think masculine, feminine, I think a lot of people think about relationships like man and woman, but it goes much, much deeper than that. And so I just kind of want to open up the conversation. Like, what do you think of when you think of masculine, feminine, and harmonizing the masculine, feminine? Like, what does it mean to you?
Yeah, I think that's such a great question. I think there is that duality to your point that we have kind of traditional gender roles where there's a masculine and feminine, and each person kind of embodies one of those roles. And also at the same time, inside of us, there's masculine and feminine energies. And I think traditionally, we've always assumed, especially in decades past, that the man is always in his masculine and he's building and conquering and achieving, and the woman's always in her feminine and she's nurturing and, being compassionate and that sort of thing. But obviously, as gender roles have evolved, that those lines are getting a lot more skewed, right? They're getting blurrier.
Yeah, which is really interesting because, like, I hear you talk about like what you immediately think of when you think of masculine, feminine is interesting and probably very common. It's nurturing and compassionate for the feminine, and like that's it.
Well, I think there's a balance of those things in both, right? I think everybody has, men have the capacity to nurture too. That's why I do what I do. So, but yeah, I think
What
definitely
do you
traditionally.
mean that's why you do what you do?
Well, so I've worked in the mental health field for 5 years. I took a brief stint to work in tech for a while and kind of have made my journey back. But I think being a man who was in a very like female dominated field for a long time, it could feel a little bit, you develop a little bit of an identity crisis if you're not really grounded in your own self-identity.
Oh, interesting. Interesting. Yeah. Okay. Is that just because you're around a bunch of females or
Oh, definitely. It's a lot
yeah,
of secondhand estrogen in the air. You got to kind of go out and I got to do some push-ups after work every day when I
get the testosterone back up? Yeah. Well, hey, know thyself, right? But I guess at the same time, if we're trying to like that is really interesting to me to hear you say because that kind of tells me that there's a feminization of the mental health and helping field
Yeah.
and that kind of puts a box around the whole thing.
Well, yeah, actually funny that you say that. I was looking up the other day, oh God, statistics on kind of men's not being employed in mental health, but actually receiving mental health treatment. This is actually
Yes.
70% of mental health care is consumed by women, actually. So it is kind of both a female dominated field in terms of the providers, but also in the consumers as well.
Okay, why do you think that is though? Because here's the theme, right? A theme is, and this is going to kind of dive us into more spiritual aspects of femininity and
Sure.
masculinity. It tends to be that women in general are quicker to wake up, as far as spiritually goes, and way quicker to have a desire to grow mentally,
Yeah.
emotionally, spiritually. It seems like an innate wiring of the feminine. And men are usually way late to the board. And it almost seems like this, because to me, what I see in that is actually not true masculinity, it's wounded masculine. Because it's like this arrogance of, I don't need help. I don't want to ask for help. I don't want to, it's all about how this will look if I pursue help for myself. When I'm a man, I can do it myself. Right. And we can go back and we can say, oh, it's a cultural conditioning and blah, blah, blah. But actually, no, it's just a spiritual concept of what the masculine can turn into and express itself as when it's not whole. Does that make sense? In the same way, when the feminine naturally is wounded and not whole, she's destructive and chaotic and mean. Right. So this is not a cultural thing where it's like, I mean, there are cultural aspects for sure, but like, I don't think that the root cause of men not wanting to seek help and be in these areas is because, oh, you're just told buck up and you don't boys don't cry. Sure, that's brainwashing that happens at a minute level, but there is an intricate wiring spiritually that the masculine is more power seeking, more arrogant in nature in that wounded state, and is less apt to say, I need help.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of truth to that. And also, which I think is a topic that I really am interested in diving into today, I think for men, the entire topic of kind of emotions is more of a problem to be managed. So I think a lot of men's approach to life is problem management. And
Yeah.
so it's like my emotions are a byproduct of the problems that I'm facing, and I need to manage those so that I can just go fix the problem. And kind of what's going on inside of me in terms of the masculine and feminine doesn't matter. This is just to shove it down, push it aside, and I got to keep moving forward. And I
Yeah.
think that's why a lot of
It's
men
almost like it
choose.
gets in the way.
Yeah, and I think that's why, to your point, a lot of men are really underdeveloped in that area because it's just a thing that's like these emotions. I wish I didn't have them because it would make me easier to, go start that business or whatever, right?
It almost seems like the emotional part feels like chaos to men.
Definitely.
And they're
Yeah.
all about just order, 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 like do, fix. I'm fixed on this, focus on this one singular thing. And this is why it's so important to have both, right? Because in my lens, well, and in Stoic lens, the obstacle is the way.
Yeah.
So if emotions are the obstacle, then they are the way. It's not that you guys don't like emotions, because here's the thing. You just don't like some emotions.
Yeah, I think it just presents, to your point, it does present this untrodden ground that's just full of snakes and chaos. And we're just, oh, I don't want to, it's throw that in a box so I can get back to work kind of deal.
Throw
For
that in a
sure.
box. Yeah, exactly. And that's how the masculine brain works, is like everything's in a box. Okay, I'm going to go in this area of my life. I'm going to open up this box. No other boxes are going to be open during this time. Just this one box. And women, it's like everything is connected to everything at all times. We see near and far, past, future, left, right, everything at once. And we feel it all at once. It's like really overwhelming
Yeah. Well, it
times.
kind of reminds me of that fallacy of kind of the left brain, right brain orientation, right? Men are so much more, and I do think some of this is cultural condition. We're so taught to be like in our logical side of our brain, and everything's a task to be accomplished or overcome. And I do think women are better at kind of looking at that more holistic picture, which has historically been considered like right brain thinking. A lot of that's a
Yeah.
fallacy.
And that kind of brings up something we were talking about earlier about leadership. I think that there's a general consensus that says men lead, women follow. Would you
For
agree
sure.
with that?
Oh, for sure. Well, and I think a lot of men find it emasculating to be led by a woman, to be maybe a controversial statement, but probably a lot of men feel that way.
Well, yeah, I'm sure that that's true. And honestly, can I just be candid with you? I
Sure.
think that's just totally ego and arrogance. Because the truth is that they have to lead together. Leadership does not mean that one's leading and the other one's following. Leading can be, we're co-leading in this thing. So we're both actually leading. I'm not like dragging you along, although honestly, women sometimes feel like they have to do that with men, especially if there's not a growth, if there's not that willingness to grow and to like work on yourself and to overcome your own wounds and stuff, because then it just feels like, what are we doing?
Yeah. Well, and
You know,
I think that's men's relationship with weakness in general, right? I do think because culturally men are so ingrained that everything in life is this dominance hierarchy competition, that any expression of weakness like emotions or, we almost repress it into the shadow self that then, when we interact with other people, there's just this like, and I mean, for very unhealed men, obviously, I work in the mental health field. So I've spent a long time looking at my icky emotions and learning to find peace with them. And have interacted with many other men that kind of live by that philosophy. And I'd love to talk more about that end of the spectrum of men. But I think for a lot of men, there is this repression of everything emotional. And so when they're with women, collaboration again becomes this like competition almost. And any expression of like giving up and allowing someone else to take the leaders is this admission of incompetence or weakness.
yeah, everything it seems like is interpreted as like lack of capability, lack of worthiness, if there's like co-leadership. But this concept that we're talking about is the killer of relationships. I
For
would say
sure.
at the root of all relationship breakdown is this concept that we're talking about right here. Is this inability to see your woman as who she truly is as a spiritual being. Recognizing her power, because I'm going to tell you right now, when the feminine is in her power, She is the most powerful and creative and unstoppable force on the face of the planet. However, in order for all of that power to be actualized, she needs the masculine. Right? And that's why this whole, I don't need a man, I'm independent, I don't need blah, 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 is bogus, BS. Okay? If we didn't need each other, we wouldn't be put here together in that way. But when the masculine is so hard-headed that he does not create a space and almost like a voice, like a watering can, right? A true masculine in the whole healed, spiritually whole place will be a number one, a container and a watering can to his feminine counterpart. Okay. And what she will do, what she will be able to do because of that is have a vision, a beautiful vision, right? That's not like, I'm going to build a tall building and it's going to be the tallest building. It's like boring. Women will have a vision that is beautiful and unlike anything you've ever seen before. They will have the freedom to express themselves. They will bring joy to the situation, and they will create. Women are the creative center. Feminine is the creative center, right? So in that relationship, though, the masculine provides boundaries, safety. Okay, here's your vision. Beautiful. I love it. Here's how we're going to make it happen. Here's how it's going to become manifest. Instead of it just being living in the cloud, here's how we're going to actually actualize it. Does that make sense? So,
Right, yeah.
So this is how the co-leading happens, right? So if the masculine suppresses the feminine, then he never gets to see the beauty of what the two of them can create together. And he misses out big time.
Yeah.
But when he recognizes his role and says, I'm going to make this shit happen, then the two of them create literally an empire. And you see this done in society with certain couples, right? And you can say, what's happening here? And at the root of it is they both, to a deep, deep level, understand their roles and they embrace the heck out of it.
Yeah, I love that. Well, and I think that's your point is such a beautiful illustration of, to kind of bring things full circle, that there's each side plays a role, right? There's strength to both sides, and finding harmony in a relationship is being able to, really appreciate and value both things that both the masculine and feminine and two separate people bring to the table.
Yes.
And then I think that's a great segue to kind of come full circle and talk about there's also this need within each individual to balance those two sides, right? Because
that's exactly right.
So I came prepared with questions to ask you here today. So my first question here officially is, so how does understanding and balancing masculine and feminine energies contribute to a deeper sense of peace and fulfillment within ourselves?
Yeah. So let's take this really deep spiritually, shall we?
Sure. I love it.
What does it mean to be a real human being? And the Bible does not talk about this, but the missing texts, the missing gospels and things like that, and just if you do some research, you'll find this. In what being a true human, a full human being really means is two things. To have a balance / harmony of your masculine, feminine energies within. And those old texts would call it androgynous. And I think that some people have misinterpreted that to take it as far as gender, to say, well, then I'm transgender or I'm non-binary because I am balancing my masculine, feminine, and I'm not either. Right?
Yeah,
no,
definitely.
That's not what it means. It means the masculine, feminine energies within you to become balanced, right? Jesus was this. He was the perfect harmony of both. And so is his divine counterpart, Mary Magdalene. She was also a beautiful balance of the two. And the other part to being a full human being is to be both fully human and fully divine. So, but in order to do this, right, we have to have harmony in the masculine, feminine, because that literally is the union of the universe. The union of the universe, the ocean of love is perfect masculine, feminine energies colluding and creating together.
Kind of that yin-yang duality.
Exactly. Yes, exactly. And I believe really that all source of distress will be linked back to, well, first of all, it's an ego, right? An egoic conflict within. That's the core, at the core of all suffering is a conflict within the ego. But we can take that a step further and say at the core of all suffering is a wounded masculine or wounded expression of masculine or feminine. That's it.
I love that. So that's a perfect segue. Then I want to ask a question. We're just segueing all
Like
the way.
segues.
Well,
I just see like someone just rolling by in a segue, like as a transition from one to the next.
Well, you bring up an excellent point. It's something that I've been thinking on a lot. As a guy who, in my past, I've often kind of fallen into these two dualistic extremes, right? Of when I was younger, I think I grew up in an environment where, both my parents had their flaws. They both did the best that they could. But my mother was, even though she was very kind in a lot of ways, she was also very controlling. And so I spent a lot of my early life just desperately rebelling and pulling away from this sense of control. And so even in my kind of late teens, early 20s, I kind of went to both sides of the pendulum. There's this side of me that was rebelling constantly and really just embracing like the hardest, did MMA for 10 years, was going to go the military route, but decided against it. Everything that was like hard and rebellious and just all of the masculine energy all the time. And yet at the same time, there was this wounded part of me that was just trapped in these like constant cycles of getting into codependent relationships where I just really struggle with boundaries and struggle to speak up for my needs and everything because it was so pounded out of me and repressed out of me, that healthy balance of masculinity. And so I think
you wanted to feel the love so much.
Yeah, well, like a sense of self-efficacy while also still being able to connect to others. And so I always felt like you could only have one or the other. You could have connection, but that meant
losing yourself.
Yeah, loss of boundaries, maybe almost giving completely into that feminine where you're only receiving, you can't have boundaries, or
gotcha.
this extreme masculine of like, this lone wolf masculine idea of I don't need people, push everyone away kind of thing. So I've done both of those things in my life to the extreme. And so I think the people that I serve now, which is often people with people pleasing and codependent tendencies, also really struggle to find that balance. So it's interesting that you said that there's a wounded side of us. So I guess from your perspective, how can learning how to harmonize those masculine and feminine energies really help people that are struggling with, say, people-pleasing, codependency, difficulty, asserting boundaries in their relationships with others?
Well, I think that a natural byproduct of harmonizing these energies within is self-confidence and personal identity. Seeing ourselves as individuals, a part of a whole, and as any individual has to have, but still be a part of the whole, they have to know where they start and stop, and others start and stop, but they have to also know that they are still connected to the whole, right? When we kind of lose one of those things, we get into big trouble. Like how you just described, right? We're going from one end to the other. So I have to know that when I'm harmonizing myself within, there's a natural process of really getting to know yourself. And you can say, you're well, and as they become healthier, right? The healthy side of the masculine would say, no, this is not okay. And actually, it's a very feminine aspect too, right? Look at the wild as a lioness. She's actually the hunter. Did you know that?
Yes, I do. The lion just sits on his ass all day.
Yeah, for protecting, but
Great
she
life.
goes out and does the hunting. She's the loyal. She's the caretaker, right? She's fierce. And she also has no problem telling that masculine lion, don't cross me. Right? No, I don't like that. No, I'm not right now. So boundaries is actually a natural expression for both masculine and feminine energy. It just depends on like how it's being exerted and how it's coming out. From a very healthy place, boundaries look like, okay, I'll use myself as an example. I've been doing too much. Okay. I've just been doing too
Sounds
much.
like you. Yep.
Yeah. In general, in my whole life, I would say. And then even just like, I'm just a doer. So I'm in this season where I'm like, Sarah, you need to do less. Period. That's it. You just need to do less for everybody else and for all of these things. So I just put up some boundaries and I said, to my partner, I will not be feeding the animals anymore in the morning. I will feed them at night only. And there was like one other thing that I just said I wasn't going to be doing anymore. But I gave my reason. I said, I need more mental, emotional, spiritual space and time for myself and for my endeavors. And so thank you for understanding. That was very clear for me. There was no like, what does she mean? What does that mean for me? It was very clear. And it was very clear why I was doing that. Right. And I have no guilt associated with it. That is a way a healthy boundaries comes forth from a feminine or a masculine. And I think that there's no way to know how to have boundaries if you have a wounded side of either, right? Because the feminine side is going to be thinking, oh my God, well, if I put this boundary, then they might leave me. And then if they leave me, I mean, I'm no good. Or the masculine will be like, I see a lot of masculines doing a lot of giving, over giving and they find people that are takers. And that's where they lack the boundaries.
Yeah, definitely.
So I think to answer your question in a very straightforward way, instead of all the wordiness, is that naturally, when you're healing both sides of themselves, there's a natural tendency to, number one, know yourself better. So you know when you even need to put boundaries, right? Am I angry because I'm not putting enough boundaries on myself and somebody's overstepping on me without even really realizing it? Then that's my issue. And then the other part is that there's just a healthy expression of those boundaries when you have this mergence. And when you're with somebody who also has that harmony, your boundaries are fine with them. Like they don't pull away their love because you've placed boundaries, right? Nothing changes.
Yeah.
Unless you're an a-hole, unless you're being very rude about it. But
yeah.
You can't just be like hurt people and then be like, I'm just putting my boundaries. That's not how that works.
Yeah, for sure. Well, I think that's such a beautiful way of putting. For me, that's kind of always what I've come to understand after many, many years of getting relationships wrong in a lot of ways, both romantic and otherwise. I think communication needs, and oh God, there's this 3-pillar thing that I've come up in my mind, and now I forget the third one. But and boundaries. That was the third one, actually. So you hit the nail on the head perfectly in that entire summary. And so I think I've loved what you said about when we can get this harmony between the masculine and feminine, we can begin to know ourselves. And when we know ourselves, we can know our needs.
Yes.
And that sounds like, oh, no, duh. Of course I know what my needs are. So many people don't.
I know.
And then they just get this, like, I'm emotional and I'm lashing out. Why? I don't know. I just feel emotional. Well, most of the time, to your point, because there's been some kind of boundary that's been crossed and a need that's been unmet, but oftentimes we don't even know what that need is. So I love getting clear on what your needs are and then being able to communicate that respectfully to protect those boundaries. I love that.
Yeah, because that's the part too, right? If I somewhere deep down they do know their needs, it's just like consciously they don't. Like there's a part of them that really knows.
Yeah.
It's just being able to be like slow down enough to get to that part that's like, I need this. Because our parts, our system and our egoic parts are very clear on what they need. It's very, very clear. We just don't listen enough. So there's other parts that are lashing out because this part isn't getting what they need. And we don't slow down. We just lash out. So then the second part, like you said, is like, okay, how do I advocate for my needs in a healthy way? Because I think what happens with a lot of people, and this is masculine and feminine, especially if they haven't been able to set good boundaries in the past, is now they're working on boundary setting, right? But there's still this like a sort of fear. And so they use anger and loud, boisterous way to do it because it's like the only way that they're like, I'm practicing this, but I'm also still scared. So I have to like have some sort of certainty. So I'm going to use anger and force to do it. And then that doesn't feel good either. Do you know what I'm saying?
Yeah, no, that was me in my 20s to a T. It's funny. I even had a past relationship where I sat down and I thought about it and I'm like, for me, it's 0 or 100. It's either I am that like loud, like pushing you away, or the floodgates are open and there's just no boundaries, baby. There's just absolutely nothing. So yeah, I mean, so true. Totally.
Yeah. And there's like this polarity happening where you're like, see, this is why I don't say my needs because I hurt people. And that is a dangerous place to be because if you voicing your needs hurts people, then now you're just like You're just like a parasite on the earth. So your thoughts say that they are, right? Not that you actually are, but like there's this belief now that like you don't even deserve to have a voice in the world because you just hurt people.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think there's a shame of like, oh, my needs can't be met. They're not worthy of being met for whatever reason. And then when you have that reinforced, when, yeah, maybe when you're younger and you're more unhealed and you don't understand, yes, there's a healthy way of communicating your needs to get them met and have people respect the boundaries, and an unhealthy way. But all you know is the lashing out way. Because I know, at least for me, my family of origin really just anytime I set needs or boundaries, they pounded that out of me. And so I was in that extreme place. And then you finally do speak up and like, this is my boundary, this is my needs. But you do it like a tiger
Now I
roaring
have
at
to
someone
yell
and
at
it doesn't go. Yeah. And then you're like,
yeah.
why isn't this working? Why don't my needs matter? So yeah,
See,
totally get it.
I knew I can't get my needs met. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well,
Yep.
and here, and then now this is like bringing up a thing that I just have to say because it's important. It's really important not to get too far over this side of like, I need to speak my needs and everybody needs to meet them. Because the truth is that the majority of our needs should be met by ourselves first.
Yeah.
Right. And a lot of times it happens to be this like projection of, well, they're not doing this and they're not giving me this and I need that. Well, are you not giving it to yourself? Right. Like they're not loving me the way that I need to. Are you loving you the way that you need to? So we need to do a lot of U-turns very, very frequently before we're like, I need this from you. Right.
Yeah.
Something like this. I need help around the house. Yeah, you probably do need somebody else's assistance with that. But I need you to pay more attention to me, or I need you to love me more or something. Probably you need to go inside first and then see what leftover needs to be met by your partner.
Yeah. I
And
love that.
that is
Well,
another way of like harmonizing that masculine and feminine within, to say like, I can get a lot of love from myself first. I don't need my partner to like constantly shower me with it.
yeah. Well, I love that. That's such a beautiful metaphor of the disharmonies we have within our own masculine and feminine manifest as disharmonies within an interpersonal masculine and feminine between two people, right? So that makes total sense.
Bingo.
I love that.
And then macro, the disharmonies manifest themselves as a collective issue.
Yeah.
And that's what we see right now with this huge, oh my gosh, it's horrible, wounded masculine and overcompensating feminine.
Yeah. Well, it's funny. You can go out into the world right now, and there is this polarization where, yeah, you do have this kind of cohort of people that's inside of the toxic feminine, and there's this also toxic masculine. Which one came first? I have no idea. But yeah, there's that extreme, and finding harmony within both of those groups is, how should I put it? Probably until everyone gets a lot healthier, those people that exist in those extreme camps are always going to exist, right?
Yeah. And I think since the dawn of the age, right? Since the dawn of creation of man, there's been those polarities. And that's the core of why we don't have utopia. If you're wondering why we don't have heaven on earth, it's because of that right there. And when all of that is harmonized and healed, then we'll have heaven on earth. But until then, we're always going to have these polarities. I will say, just as a thread in humanity, it's been very common, I should say, that the patriarchal standpoint and fight for more of a patriarchal driven world has been the majority of the seasons, right? We have our ages of feminine when she rises back up, and we're actually entering into another one of those right now. But it tends to be mostly that the feminine gets suppressed and wants to be like ruled by the masculine, and the patriarchy wants to rule. It's why we have the religion that we have right today, patriarchal. They wiped out the feminine in order to create one singular masculine force of creation, and rules and just one lane of thinking. And the feminine has been all but wiped out from history in that regard, which has done a lot of damage.
Yeah. Well, it's so funny you say that.
Segue.
So follow-up question here. We might segue. We'll see. Um, it's how my brain works. It's just a fractal of different conversation trees. We'll go down all of them
Exactly.
eventually. So I, having stepped into this life of starting coaching and wanting to work for myself for a long time, but finally kind of taking the leap here in the last little bit, I follow a lot of kind of business people nowadays, entrepreneurial types and that sort of thing.
Mm-hmm.
It's not surprising to me, but also astounding to me how many of them are men who are highly successful men who are deeply, devastatingly insecure. I think to your point of this, this wounded masculine then seeking to dominate. And, I think it's true for so many. I don't think that's true for every segment of men or women. But I think so commonly, especially for men, we see people that the highest levels of success being people that are just really deeply wounded and insecure. And also from my time kind of in the mental health world, and especially kind of learning more and working with people struggling with codependency, it's interesting how there's almost a duality of sometimes how I'm going to say the wounded masculine, but if I get this wrong, feel free to correct me. There's a subsection of men who maybe their trauma is to lean into this wounded masculine of kind of dominance and patriarchy, and I'm just going to go get money and women. I won't say the actual way that I was going to say it, but
He was going to say the
also,
B word, everybody. Shame on you.
hey man, I've lived a life or two, let me tell you. And also there's the subsection of men who increasingly we see are flaming out of society, right? That are kind of becoming the, live in your parents' house until you're, 25, 30, whatever.
Mm-hmm.
I don't talk to women. I've just decided that, I'm going to stay on 4chan and kind of be in these angry circles of men and kind of completely, still be wounded, but kind of just give up in a lot of ways.
Yeah.
And so I think a lot of those men are also the same men that tend to struggle with codependency issues. So I'm curious if you can kind of speak to the different manifestations of the wounded masculine.
How long do we have? Well, first of all, I do want to mention that just because we're talking about the wounded masculine does not mean there's not a presence of a wounded feminine out there, ladies, by the way.
I can't speak to that perspective, but.
I think that there tends to be themes. I think that there tends to be the wounded masculine exerts herself in certain ways, whereas the wounded feminine exerts herself in other ways. This is kind of what I was talking about earlier, where I was like, yeah, men, it's not that you don't like all emotion, you just don't like some, right?
Oh,
because
definitely.
men, here's the thing, right? All of us, here's a kicker for everybody, okay? Everything that we do is based out of emotion. Men, don't tell me anything differently, because everything that you do, whether it's good or bad, is based out of emotion. So if you succeed, no, it's very neutral for me. I just have to focus on this thing. Very neutral. Okay. Bullshit. I call BS. Underneath there is either an anger, and this is what I'm saying. Usually men will grasp onto anger as fuel much more readily than sadness. Of course, we know that underneath the anger is actually sadness, but the anger will be a fuel to drive, to make things happen. So here's the thing, right? If temporary might not be so bad of a thing. If that becomes a way of life, bad thing. And the problem is that no matter what these men create and do and accomplish, it will never be enough. It will never be enough to fill the void that they feel inside, that they are not good enough or that they have something to prove.
Well, it's so funny you said, if I can interject.
Please.
Watching with the highly big name entrepreneur, I won't say his name, he's an influencer on the internet, but talking about a lunch that he had with a guy who's a...
Can I just please guess it?
Sure, go for it.
What's his name? Oh my gosh. The guy who is all about school.
It is actually.
Yeah, of course it is. I know exactly who you're talking about. What's his name again?
Alex Hormozy.
So I have to tell you, this is an interesting cat, right? I've watched him. I've gone through seasons of following him, and then I've unfollowed him, and I'm just like, man, you need some healing. Such an interesting cat, because he's like top of the game right now.
Oh yeah, he's killing it for sure. Well, and it's so interesting though, because you see so many people, whether they're millionaires or there's been, both actual good documented research in the kind of mental health literature, but also a lot of anecdotal evidence from, listening to these guys who talk to people that have reached insane levels of success, millionaire, billionaire, etc. And you ask all of them, like, what's next for you? I just need more money, And it's like, okay, at what point is your hole finally filled?
Okay, this is funny. A friend of mine texted me yesterday and said, "What the hell is with people when you get engaged? They always ask you, when are you getting married? When you get married, they ask you, when are you having kids?" And I kind of like just got to the core right away, and I said, because everybody is obsessed with what's next, what's next, what's next, what's next, what's next, and most people are not able to be here now, enjoying the present.
Yeah.
And so whenever they hear about what you're doing, what's next? What's next? What's next? What's next? And it's like, dude, I'm just enjoying the present. That's okay too, Or like when you accomplish something. So what's next on your goal list? I don't know. I just did something amazing. Like, can I enjoy that? And it's, I don't know where that came from. You just said something that reminded me of, oh yeah, the constantly never enough, right? There are more than one pandemic that have happened, right, since 2019. I think we all know that. One of them is this never enoughness or never satisfied, right? I'm not content and nothing's satisfying me. And it's because we're reaching for things that are such candy when we need nutrients. So we're feeding the ego. We're feeding the animal part of us, right? And this is spiritual too, right? The ego is considered the animalistic side of us. And in certain old ancient texts, they'll say, those who become a dog will die like a dog. Meaning, if you become what your animal side is, instincts want all the time, then you die like a dog, right? Very, very careless. But if you become a soul, right, you get that soul fed. And so we have a spiritual problem in the world.
Oh, definitely.
And that spiritual problem is that we are so obsessed with getting our impulses pleasured that we don't actually find real satisfaction and peace and the things that we're actually looking for. This is a masculine and a feminine issue. Because you know what the feminine does with that? And well, this is both, right? But she's going out getting attention. You see this all over social media, right? Bodies everywhere, less and less clothes, more and more makeup, more and more plastic surgery, more and more look at me and look at all of these things, right? It's constant flash. And men actually somewhat of the same.
Well, and I was about to say, we talked a little bit about what kind of that wounded masculine and out of balance masculine looks like. What does the wounded feminine or out of balance feminine look like?
Well, let's just talk about them as energy forces first. Okay, so sure. The wounded masculine, when taken too far, will become too strict, too orderly, too rigid. There will be no freedom, no flow, no fun, no creativity, very little love. Well, the wounded feminine, when taken too far, will be destructive, very chaotic, uncertain, balanced in a way where the creativity will almost be manifest as darkness. I know some dark feminines out there, by the way. They are great manifestors, but they are evil at heart. So they also, that feminine will seek drama or the feeling of importance, right? It's just chaos. Period. Personalities will change how that chaos is exerted. For instance, my chaotic nature wouldn't choose to start seeking drama and sleep around with a bunch of dudes. My chaos would be, I'm up and I'm down. My emotions are up, my emotions are down. Very unbalanced. Or I'll just be almost like, very fidgety. But a really destructive feminine, I relate this to a fire that is uncontained. It's wild. It's destructive, and it does not give two shits what's in its path.
What's interesting? I'm
like that's such an interesting thing to think about. I just thought about this. Not even love or strong emotions like the feminine becomes blind when she's wounded or in harm. And oh my gosh, a perfect representation of this is the TV show. That's all I'll say about that. You know, reality TV, look at reality TV. Look at the wounded feminine, how she shows up.
Yeah, that makes sense. I was about to joke, how do you know my exes? But we'll leave that one alone too.
So, wounded masculine usually attracts wounded feminine.
That makes sense.
Wounded feminine usually attracts wounded masculine.
Yeah. Well, and I'm almost, this is my own brain coming from kind of more traditional psychology perspective. I'm almost kind of likening it to different psychopathologies, right? So a lot of times in a cliche way, kind of dysfunctional women in particular are kind of viewed as having things like borderline personality disorder, where there's all this chaos and emotional instability. Whereas kind of men, the kind of classical trope is like what? Silence of the Lambs, like sociopathic, just like nothing but task orientation. Yeah, I mean, I think narcissism too. I think the actual symptoms of narcissism, there is like a lot of emotional impulsivity and that sort of thing. So I think probably that or sociopathy, I think, in terms of like just being insanely task oriented to the point of having no empathy, no compassion, no nothing. Right. So
yeah, lacking all feeling. Yeah, that makes sense.
So that makes total sense. So, and I have often spent a long time trying to find this balance, even within myself, even in my own life currently. You know, I've had times where I've really embraced this more traditional and masculine energy in me with like MMA and powerlifting and all, you know, rock music and all kinds of things, and have also been in mental health, which is obviously more kind of compassion and caring and that sort of thing. And so I wonder if you could speak to what has your journey looked like in trying to find that balance between masculine and feminine energy, and how can the rest of us get to that space too?
So I don't believe in balance. That's
great, because I'm bad at it.
That's one thing I do want to say. I think that there's a time and a place for everything. And sometimes there's a time for a more masculine presence being expressed. Sometimes there's a time for more feminine presence to be expressed. I think that we can find more peace when we stay away from the extreme swings. Right? The less extremes we can be in anything, I think the better, especially when it comes to being hardcore masculine, hardcore feminine, right? I've had my seasons, more seasons than the other one.
Secret admission of a wild side? Is that what?
No. Actually, the opposite. Well, no, actually, yeah. So I guess my path had been, yeah, it was very wild growing up, actually, very rebellious, partying, just got it's like I was free, right? I'm just free. Nobody can, you can't ground me. I'll just sneak out, right?
Yep. I was there
you
too.
Can't put any container on me because I will just break right out of it, which is actually a very good quality to have, especially in business. If it's exerted the right way, don't you dare tell me I can't do something, or don't put limits on me because I will break right out of that. And also having a desire for others. I don't want anybody to feel confined. So I went through that, and then I went through a long season of just the opposite. Rules, structure, routine, high drive, all work, no play. We're talking like 15-hour days, you know, every day, 6 days a week, just no stop, all gas, just the doing side, right? And so I would say, like you, I've gone from one side to the other. I think what I learned from my freedom era, we'll just call it that, was it causes a lot of pain. And it was a source of a place where I had to do a lot of my healing. So I learned very quickly that is not a place that I want to be. And that order and discipline is freedom for me now. Whereas just no rules, no limits, no structure, no schedule was freedom before. That is so not the case. That's the destructive feminine coming out with no masculine whatsoever. And so, you know, I became my own masculine, putting rules and structure and everything. And I think that I did it too much, too far, became a little bit overdoing it because it meant safety to me. My mom was very chaotic. It was chaos in the home, and that it's not safe. So I swung all the way to the other end, saying like, big time rules, big time structure, big time, I can contain this. And then it's not so chaotic and scary. And this is certainty for me. In recent times, I feel that I have a much better balance of both. I know that I have a very strong feminine side. Very, like, in my natural state, I am more feminine than I am masculine. But I've been told this too by others, that I have a very good balance and harmony between the two. Like, I can be both at the same time or just as needed, right? So now I'm very much like, I know when it's time to go. However, I know how important it is to keep the feminine aspect of rest and nurturing and love, and also creating an environment of creativity present, even while I'm quote unquote hustling, right?
Yeah,
Because there is a time to drive and there's a time to rest.
that makes total sense. Well, I love that. Oh
That's
Lord.
just been my journey.
Yeah. Well, and in my mind, kind of as you're talking about it, kind of this finding that balance between all structure, all burden, no play, and complete utter chaos and lack of direction. It's almost
Yeah.
like, in my mind, I think of it as choosing the burden that you're willing to carry, right? And I think so many
Yeah.
people kind of don't. And it even makes me think in toxic or dysfunctional relationships, to kind of speak to that and kind of people pleasing, codependency, that sort of thing. So often we end up in these dynamics where we are doing all these things like overgiving or having our boundaries be violated. And it's not really, obviously relationships require work, but it's the type of work that we're doing that actually matters
Yes.
in the end, right?
Yeah. Yeah. And, I tend to not like the whole relationships require work. I think, like, they require effort and care and attention. But like, work to me is like, and it shouldn't have a negative connotation, but it does. Work to me is like something you have to do. Whereas like something in a relationship should be something that you want to do. Like, I want to care for you. I want to notice what you like and don't like. I want to do these things. That's a natural overflow of love. I think a lot of people think it's work when, like, they don't have enough self presence, where they're like, it's hard. Like, it's hard to do. It takes effort to do, when in reality, love is the easiest thing to do. It doesn't actually take effort. Truthfully, right? We were all born of love. That takes no effort at all. No effort. It
Yeah.
just takes presence.
Well, I like that, mentioning that work has a negative connotation. To me, there's almost like a connotation of resentment mixed into there too, right? Of like,
Right.
I have to do
Have to
this,
do
and if I
this. Yep.
don't, then,
Yeah.
and it's like, well, what are these actions that you're resenting? And does that maybe express some kind of need or boundary that you're allowing yourself to violate for the purposes of keeping this going? And is that
Yeah. Or
the thing
maybe
you
just
should
a
keep going?
selfish outlook, right?
Yeah, totally.
Like if you think this is so hard, then just to be single then
Yeah.
for a time and learn how to meet your own needs, and that it won't be so hard to meet somebody else's needs.
Yeah. Well, yeah. And
Yeah, go ahead.
well, and I love that you mentioned that earlier, and I totally wanted to comment on that, but I forgot. Um, you mentioned kind of being out of balance within the self and attempting to make other people happy when you yourself aren't happy. And I know I've gone through seasons of that in my life where I've been in relationships that ended up being really unhealthy, and got into kind of the therapy and dug in really deep and realized, oh wow, I was really attempting in my own life. I wasn't at the point where I was just happy myself. I couldn't give
Yeah.
myself happiness. And so I was really in a relationship, like hoping that this person would deliver that. And then, of course, you end up in a relationship and that often falls short. And then you're like, and you just keep piling on demands, or that's kind of a typical, there's this
It's
weird
such
duality
a
with
fine
codependency too.
line to walk, of like, I make myself happy and I don't need anybody. And yet I'm in this partnership and I do have needs within the partnership, right? Because I think that a lot of people think, I need to be like, this is so hard to say, but I'll do my best. Like, that we should be fully healed and fully complete before we come into a relationship and all these things. We shouldn't need anything from our partner, but it's nice to have them. I'm sorry, but that's lovely. That sounds amazing. Sounds like somebody really inspirational said that, but it's not true. I do need my partner. We do need each other. If we didn't need each other, I would just be able to get pregnant by myself. Okay.
I mean,
Well,
some people are working on that technology, so maybe in a couple of...
that's just crazy. It's like taking away the absolute spiritual essence of what it means to be a human being.
Oh, absolutely.
Right? We are men and women, masculine, like this is what makes the world go around, quite literally. And if we didn't need each other, right, then the feminine could just exist. There's a book called Men Are From Mars, Women Are From Venus.
I've
And
read
there's,
it.
yeah. So he talks about, obviously it's like fantasy, that the fact that he says literally women all existed together on Venus, Venetians, whatever he called them. And men were from Mars, they're Martians. And they soon discovered, right, that they were not feeling satisfied just being there by themselves doing their things, right? As amazing as it was for women to just all be nurturing each other, they were lacking something. And as amazing as it was for men to be there conquering and fighting and like striving, they needed somebody to do it for. So, yes, learn how to be, I would say, content by yourself, and then learn how to embrace being happy with someone else. No matter what anybody says, our relationships impact the quality of our lives. I don't care who you are. They do. The quality of our relationships dictate the quality of our emotions, mental state, all of these things. So yeah, be content by yourself and then find happiness with somebody else. But because you're content with yourself, this is the kicker, right? Because you're content with yourself, you're not just going to take anybody off the street and be like, I just have to have a partner. You're going to be picky. You're going to take your time. You're going to be patient. And you're going to wait for that person who's like also at a similar level than you and has a similar direction than you, because you're going to be changing. They're going to be changing. Nothing's ever going to be stagnant and the same. So who you meet today is not going to be the same person that you're with 5 years down the road.
Yeah, that makes total sense. I love that. I was about to say, I feel called out, but yes, I love that. When we're more healed ourselves, we can kind of set standards that maybe we would not.
Wait. You feel called out?
No, because I know in the past I've been that person, right? Of just,
which one?
Just accepting things that I knew were below my standards in terms of how healed the person was, how much work they were willing to do on themselves. Because I think, unfortunately in life, at least to me, sometimes it feels hard to find people out there that are really doing the work. And I think, obviously you and myself and all of your lovely listeners, we're all people that are doing that work, right? But I feel like we're sometimes probably this unfortunate minority.
I love this term, doing the work.
Go on.
There's a comedic account out there that I follow, and they kind of make fun of spiritual woo-woo-ness. And there's this one video where she's like, I'm just doing the work. I'm doing the work. I know you're not doing the work, but I know I'm doing the work. And they're like, how do you know I'm not doing the work? I'm 100% doing the work. They're like, nope, I can tell you're not doing the work. And it's just like, yeah, it's funny, but it's also true. Like, what the hell is the work? Like, how is that tangible? Like, it, zooming out from a spiritual perspective, I think there's really only two options. You're either conscious or you're unconscious. Wait, let me just add one last thing to that. So,
go for it.
Like, when we're talking about like doing the work, I think there's so many ways to do the work, but as long as there is a consciousness that you are bringing and wanting to bring more of into life, you're doing the work, right? There are a lot of unconscious people in this world. And even they're on their path, whatever, that's fine. But I think that that's the only really classification that I can say those people are not doing the work, because there's no desire to become more conscious of self and others. There's no care. There's actually, this would be literal, they've lost their soul. Soulless.
Yeah.
Soulless. So like you talk about zombies. Yeah, I mean, in a way, we are actually in a world with zombies right now.
Yeah, well, or certainly to your point that you made earlier, kind of completely giving into that ego self, right? There's so many people that are living that YOLO, like I, swipe on Tinder every night. I'm with a new person every other day, and I'm, spending money and
or even worse, those people who like literally want to bring destruction to others.
Yeah,
you see a lot of this with the woke community right now. It's not just about like they're trying to live into their ideals. They are trying to tear down everybody who does not believe in their ideals. That is soulless, because now I don't look at, because you don't believe what I believe, your animal doesn't believe what my animal believes, you're no longer human to me, and you're less than, right? And I will take you down, and I have zero regard for your feelings, for your well-being, for your physical safety. I don't give a shit. Okay, I have lost my soul, because a soul sees the human. I see the human in you and the soul in you, and you see it back in me.
Yeah, that makes sense. Well, and I think it's funny. Well, a little bit of backstory about myself. I actually had a stint where for several years I was really entrenched in those communities. Not to get super
Oh, the
political or
left
anything, but
stuff, the woke
yeah,
stuff.
like really, really left end of the spectrum. And yeah, I eventually got to the point where I walked away from it for exactly the same reason that I'm like, it's so ironic that in these communities that espouse kind of compassion and acceptance and all of that, they're so incredibly intolerant at the same time. So I got to
Yeah.
the point where I was just like, I'm on my healing journey. There's a community of people, like you mentioned, that are kind of aware, conscious, but they're woke. The woke community, I don't know if I'd agree that those are the same people. So yeah, I absolutely agree.
They would say that they are, but
Yeah.
when you lose regard for human beings, you're no longer conscious. And I don't, and I see problems with that in the far right as well, because they talk a very similar way about the far left. And I'm just like, who are you? Hypocrite.
Yeah.
And then the fact is that the majority of people are more hypocrites than they are loving human beings. I see some very, very supposed Christians and influential people that are outright with their faith, and then like post negativity and just kind of like making fun of the other side. And I just have to go, God is confused.
Yeah. Well, and again, I think the two ends of the political spectrum, right, are probably some manifestation of the two dysfunctional ends of the extremes of the energy,
Ooh, that's
right?
a good point. The right is the dysfunctional masculine, and the right is the dysfunctional feminine.
Yeah, I mean, I could totally see that. So we're all mere mortals, and we're all trying to get
Not
this
me.
right.
Just
I mean,
kidding.
I'm the embodiment of the divine masculine, of course.
I'm
But
just kidding.
so how do we? And I'm in this space too. And my life is, I'm allowing my stuff that I'm doing now to really take up a lot of my life. And every now and then, I notice when I get too far into the, oh my god, all I'm doing all day is like nurturing and I'm just like, oh, I just need to go, like, so what can we do if we're someone that kind of notices, hey, I think maybe I'm too far out of whack in my masculine or my feminine, maybe that's turning toxic in some way, one way or the other. What do we kind of do to get more close to that balance?
Yeah, asking yourself, what does my feminine need? Or what does my masculine need? How does it want to be expressed, right? And or the best of both worlds would be, you can actually take that into like everything you do, right? Like my clients know that I have a very strong feminine presence, but I also have this masculine side that's very direct, very strong, very assertive. And I intertwine that with everything that I do. So just because I'm helping people doesn't mean I have to be like, uh-huh, yeah. How does that make you feel? You know what I mean? Like that would just kill my soul, because that's not me. It's just not me. So find a way, I would say, to intertwine both of your energies and everything that you do. That'd be the ideal, right? You don't have to adhere to this boxed way of how, well, if I'm in this, if I'm doing this, then I have to be this way. This goes for stay-at-home moms too, right? Like just because you're a stay-at-home mom doesn't mean that you have to be all, it has to look a certain way. You know what I'm saying? Be who you are. The all we have to do in our time here on this earth is be who we are, and not who we think we have to be, not who society conditioned us that we have to be, not how certain jobs tell us that we have to be. Like, be who you are, and you can be a manifestation of very masculine and really helping and healing people, or very feminine in doing that. There is a place for both, and we need them both. But if you're like swinging the pendulum, I'm all over here, I'm all over here, find a way to hover more closely in the middle, right? Like if you have a very masculine job, you're doing that all day long, then at night when you come home, be very feminine. Take a bath. I don't know, paint, do something creative, right? Like give yourself a massage or movement or something that, and these are all just top of my head feminine things that I'm thinking about, but whatever it is that your feminine needs, sometimes it needs to work out. We have to go inside more and get the answers from inside, because nobody on the, I can't say, oh, here's your self-care prescription. Go home and do that and you'll feel better. It's so individualized. And I think that we just all need to spend a little bit more time in conversation with ourselves.
Yeah, that makes so much. Well, and I love that because it so ties into the parts work that you always talk about, right?
Yeah. What does this part of me need? You know, I just have really gotten, like, that has become my way of living. Almost in a meditation, like to live is meditating. And you're in this constant state of meditation while also living life. And, you know, last night, for instance, my plan was after a full day of working and being with clients and on calls and things like that, I was going to come home and work on, you know, a program, more goal setting. And my mind and my body was like, no,
I know I've had those before.
you are not doing any more today. So I listened and I fed myself, because that's what you do to take care of yourself, your physical body. And I did some yoga and I listened to relaxing music and I just kind of I just chilled. And so we have to trust that even those parts are part of the process and that there's productivity in those moments. Because if we don't, here's what I like to tell people. Sometimes you need to stop at a stop sign or on a, what do you call it? When you get off on the side of the road, like a little pit stop in order for you to be able to go farther.
Yeah, that makes total
sense. The really
sense.
masculine side of me would have said, nope, go, go, go. Keep doing it. You said you were going to do this. This is your goal. But I burn out way quicker then.
Yeah, I've
then
totally
a mile
been in
down
that
the
space
road,
before.
I'm toast for a week. I used to do that to myself. I would work so hard. I would get sick about every 3 months. And I'd be down for a week. And it's like, duh. Because you're trying to sprint when this is a marathon.
Yeah. I love that. No, I definitely know I've been in those spaces too of really I'm, getting to that phase of really working on my life. And then you listen to all the gurus and everything out there. You need to be grinding constantly.
You can sleep when you're dead. Yeah.
Yeah.
Hustle culture is over, man.
Yeah.
It's over. It's time collectively that we bring the feminine back into existence, the importance of her, so that we don't have burnout, so that we don't have aggression. We don't have, and this will be the last thing I say, because I know we're wrapping up, but we look around at all of this rape and violence and weird child stuff, really sick stuff, right? This is the result of suppressing the feminine for too long. This is the result. Because when the feminine is suppressed, the masculine is overexerted. And he's also repressed, right? You cannot suppress and repress one without suppressing and repressing the other. They come in tandem. It's like, I don't know the analogy, but you just can't. They work together. So when you repress one, you repress the other, right? And so what is a natural tendency when something is suppressed? You see this in religious Catholic pedophilia all the time, right? They say, no, sex with a woman is horrible. You don't do it. Women are awful. They're below us. And therefore, their sexual energy comes out as homosexuality, pedophilia, these types of nasty, awful things. So what happens when you try to push a beach ball underneath the water? It pops up and it goes way up in the air.
Yeah.
Instead of floating on the surface where it belongs.
Yeah. Well, and it's such a great allusion to, the works of Jung, right? We have the shadow self that we kind of push those things into, but they always come back up, right? Often in much nastier ways than if we would have just looked at them and allowed themselves to express themselves. So that makes total sense.
Yeah. And this is why we see this collective shift back to the feminine happening, because you can only take so much of it. And, in relationships, this shows up as this traditional marriage where the man chases his passion, the woman stays home to do the things, and she gives up her passion and main purpose in the world, which is maybe it is to raise children into the world. Maybe that's your main purpose. I know that that's not all women's only purpose. I know that that may be a part of our purpose. But, then you see her wanting to break the F out of that box too. She cheats on her husband. She says, enough of this. I need to find myself at 40 years old. She gets a divorce and the husband's like, I thought everything was fine. No, everything was not fine because you were doing what you wanted to do while I stayed here and didn't do what I wanted to do. And he's like, well, I didn't really want to do this either, but I just thought I was providing for you and the family. And it's like just this huge unhealthiness in the dynamic. And all we really have to do is just embrace both sides. We each both. We have a purpose. We have an individual purpose, and we have a collective purpose, right? The collective purpose would be to procreate, the home stuff, right? Raise the children, do the things. That's collective, by the way. That's not just a mommy's job. That is not just a woman's job.
Men everywhere we're just being quiet, right?
Men,
definitely, yes.
Men help with the raising, because you hear my masculine, because this is because it's truth. And you know what? Here's the thing, I'm okay putting men in their place because this is the truth and people know the truth when they hear it. The truth is that men, you belong at home too to help. You don't just have one job. You don't just go out there and make money, right? And women, if there is something that you want to do in life, then do not use your kids and your family as an excuse. Sorry, it does not work that way. Because one day you're going to resent your kids. You're going to resent having them. And you're going to say, oh, don't have kids. If I will, and then you deter other people from doing what God created them to do. And have boundaries with your husband that says, I have a passion and a purpose in the world too. I want to go out and fulfill that. That means we need to be a team at home so that I can go out and do my things too.
I love that. Very true.
And men, check your ego for not being the breadwinner then.
I just want to say on behalf of men everywhere, I love washing dishes. It's my favorite thing. I'd be happy to help.
Changing diapers. I will say in our house, my partner will not let me touch the trash. It's a huge no-no. He won't let me touch doors and he won't let me touch the trash.
Wow.
Those are the things that are off limits for me to do.
I like that. Well,
and we both do laundry. We both clean the kitchen. We both sweep and vacuum. We both take care of the property.
Well, and I think that's such a testament to you two both being so grounded in this beautiful balance within yourselves. And then because of that, and I've seen you two interact with each other, and you do have this beautiful balance where you guys are both very in touch with each other. And also at the same time, there's this seamless flow between the masculine and feminine energies, even between you two, right? Of maybe sometimes you're stepping more into your masculine and he's stepping more into his and that sort of thing. So I think being really grounded within yourselves seems like it's been working really great for you guys. So it's awesome.
Yeah. Thank you. Yeah. And I think that just my message to everyone else is that's what the harmony looks like, right? That there are some areas that maybe non-traditional that you as a woman tend to be more masculine in and better. That's your gift. Own that and try not to be with a man who has severe self-confidence issues where if you are leading in that area and he's like, I should be leading in this area, then you have, conflict. Because that's I think something that works really well with James and I, well, you too, actually, my partner, James.
Other.
Both of you guys. But, with my partner and I is that there are some areas where some might say, oh, yeah, that seems a little odd, that she's more masculine and he's definitely more feminine in that. But we just know, but at the same time, I wouldn't let it be any other way. I'm to a point in my life where if you try to suppress or want me to act more passively than I really am, it's just not going to work. It's just not going to work.
Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, I've been in those situations too, where it's just really hard to, I think often in relationships, we can kind of show up and perform a little bit and squeeze ourselves into, holes and boxes that we don't belong in. But eventually whatever you are is going to come out. And the longer you're with someone, the more true that is. So
6 months. 6 months is the longest I think anybody can have to hide their true colors, and then it starts to come out and you're like, wait a second, this isn't what we were when we were dating. So like best advice is just be yourself right out the gate. So then you don't have to do a whole bunch of unwiring later,
Yeah. No,
because
I love
that
that.
is awful. I knew this, we could turn it into a 3 hour, but you know, we'll have a next one.
I love it. I'd be happy
How many
to,
of your
yeah.
questions did we get through?
We got through all of them. Okay, this is
Oh,
full
wow.
disclosure. I had a huge list of questions, and I'm like, okay, let's not do 5 hour podcast our first run. Maybe the second time out we'll do a 5 hour podcast, but
Yeah.
I pared it down to 3 or 4, so we nailed all of them. So it's been
Nice.
great.
Wow. I'm very impressed. Yeah. Would love to talk more about consciousness,
Yeah,
the
definitely.
soul aspect of us, and like the ego, because that just seemed to be a theme that kept coming up today. And I think
Yeah.
that it's really an elusive topic. It's like, how do you understand consciousness, right? People have been trying to do it forever. How do you describe consciousness? Yeah, so consciousness and the nature of the soul.
Yeah. Well, and so much of this is new learning for me myself. So, I come from more of a traditional psychology and mental health background. And I think one thing that I really value about our relationship is that I get to learn so much of this stuff. So yeah, thank you for answering all of my questions. It's been enlightening for me today. I love that. Hey, we're all about collaboration. I love it.
Yeah, yeah. We're practicing what we preached. Well, hey guys, thanks so much for tuning in. That is going to be it for today. We will be back, James and I, with more episodes like this. If there's a topic that you really want us to touch on as you're hearing us speak, please do let me know. You can email me, sarah@sparkflc.com. Otherwise, please, of course, share this episode, subscribe to my channel so you're alerted of new episodes. And again, go on Amazon, check out the book. It's really, really an enlightening tool, even for me, because it was more of a transmitted message. And then, of course, if you are interested in attending this upcoming retreat in March 6th through the 12th, these are the dates. We're going to Costa Rica. Again, 5 more spots left. So please email me immediately or reserve your spot on the website, www.sparkflc.com/retreat, or email me, sarah@sparkflc. I love you guys very much. Thank you so much, as always, for tuning in. And James, thank you for an intricate discussion on masculine and
Yeah,
feminine.
absolutely. Thanks, Sarah.
Until next time, guys, we'll talk to you very, very soon.